Beneath the serene waters of a quiet American lake, a town lay forgotten for 50 years, its secrets submerged, its story untold, until the day it finally surfaced. The town of Cedar Hollow had always been a quiet place, tucked away in the rolling hills of central Wisconsin. If you asked anyone in the nearby area, they'd tell you it was the kind of town where life moved slowly, where the biggest event of the year was the Harvest Festival or the annual 4th of July parade. It was the sort of place that never made headlines, a town that seemed to exist outside of the hustle and bustle of the rest of the world. In 1920, Cedar Hollow had been thriving, with a population of just over 1,000 people. Its wooden buildings stood proudly along Main Street, while farmers worked the fertile land that surrounded the town. Cedar Hollow was the heartbeat of the county, the hub where everyone gathered and everyone knew each other's name. Life was simple, predictable, but no one knew that the town's future was already sealed in a way no one could have ever imagined. The town's isolation made it the perfect candidate for a secret project. As the years passed, the government began to look for places to build reservoirs and dams, and Cedar Hollow, nestled between two hills and surrounded by a network of rivers, was deemed the ideal location for one. In 1929, the decision was made. The town would be submerged. A new lake would rise in its place, flooding the land and the lives of the people who called it home. For months, the residents of Cedar Hollow were given notice that they would have to move. The government compensated them for their land, offering relocation assistance, but it didn't lessen the blow. Cedar Hollow wasn't just a place. It was a community, a home, a memory, and now it would be erased. By 1930, the construction of the dam began, and the town's days were numbered. The river was diverted, and slowly but surely, the waters began to rise. The once bustling streets of Cedar Hollow were now empty, the homes and buildings abandoned. But just before the last of the residents packed up and left, something strange happened. The town didn't just disappear. It didn't dissolve into the past like so many forgotten places. No, Cedar Hollow was buried in a way that would remain hidden for half a century. As the reservoir was filled, the buildings, roads, and streets were submerged beneath the still waters of what became known as Cedar Lake. In the years that followed, Cedar Hollow became nothing more than a footnote in the county's history. The lake, a beautiful and serene body of water, became a popular destination for boating, fishing, and swimming. Tourists came to visit the picturesque town that never was, unaware of the buried town beneath them. But there were always stories. Local legends about the town beneath the lake circulated in hushed whispers, stories of ghostly sightings and strange lights in the water. Fishermen claimed they sometimes felt the eerie sensation of something watching them from below the surface. But no one took these stories seriously. They were just that, stories, passed down through generations, fading with time. That is, until 1980, when the lake began to reveal a secret it had kept hidden for over 50 years. One summer afternoon, during a particularly dry year, the water level of Cedar Lake dropped lower than it ever had before. The shoreline, usually submerged beneath the surface, became exposed, and to the amazement of those who gathered along the banks, something unexpected emerged. At first, it was barely noticeable. A few old stones, a couple of brick walls peeking out of the water. But as the weeks went on, more and more of the town's forgotten structures became visible. The remains of houses, old street lamps, and even the remnants of the town's church steeple slowly came into view. Cedar Hollow was returning, but this time it wasn't from a memory, it was real. The town had been hidden beneath the water, preserved by the lake that had swallowed it whole. What was once thought to be a legend now stood before them, tangible and real. But how had Cedar Hollow managed to stay hidden for so long? And why was it suddenly reappearing after all these years? The questions lingered, and the search for answers began. What lay beneath the murky waters of Cedar Lake? Was it a town forgotten by time? Or was it something more? The mysterious return of Cedar Hollow had begun a chain of events that would unravel a story buried for decades, one that had remained submerged for so long, only to emerge when the world was least prepared for it. The re-emergence of Cedar Hollow wasn't just a strange incident. It was an unraveling mystery that seemed to have no logical explanation. For weeks, locals stood at the edge of Cedar Lake, staring in awe at the sunken remnants of their forgotten town, which had been hidden beneath the waters for 50 years. What had been lost was now coming back, but it only left more questions in its wake. Sheriff Samuel Grant had been working in the area for over 20 years, and in all his time in Dunmore County, he had never encountered a case quite like this. When the first reports of the town's reappearance came in, he thought it was a joke, but as the story spread, he couldn't ignore the images of buildings rising from the lake bed, eerily preserved by the slow, steady pool of the water. "I thought it was an old wives' tale," Sheriff Grant said, as he stood near the exposed town square, staring out at the skeletal remains of Cedar Hollow. "I thought it was an old wives' tale. You hear rumors about sunken towns, but this was different. It wasn't just some old legend. It was real." The first real signs of something odd came when a local fisherman, Bob Miller, had ventured into the shallows of the lake, curious to see what lay beneath the water. Armed with only his fishing rod, Bob hadn't intended to uncover the remnants of an entire town. But as he cast his line, his hook caught on something metal, something hard and unmistakable. "I thought it was just an old piece of junk, some rusted pipe or something. But when I pulled it up, it was a street lamp. Not the kind we have now. This was old, like something from the early 1900s. That's when I knew something wasn't right." Soon, what began as a single fisherman's discovery turned into a full-scale investigation. Authorities, along with historians and archaeologists from around the state, flocked to Cedar Lake to examine the sunken town. It didn't take long for the team to realize just how deep the mystery went. In addition to the street lamps and foundations, entire buildings began to reveal themselves. Wooden houses with their walls still intact, the frame of a church steeple rising above the water, and even old cobblestone streets that had somehow remained untouched by the erosion of time. But there was something even more bizarre that drew the attention of the investigators: the town's records. At the base of what was once Cedar Hollow's central building, a small brick town hall, archaeologists discovered a set of perfectly preserved documents. There was something written on them, something that didn't belong in the context of a normal town's history, Dr. Clara Simmons said, as she carefully examined the fragile papers. At first glance, it looked like a standard deed for land ownership, but then I saw something strange. A note in the margin, written in a different hand, one that wasn't part of the original records. It said, "Bury it. Let the water hide what is to be forgotten." The note was cryptic and unsettling, suggesting that Cedar Hollow had been intentionally hidden, submerged in the lake, not as part of a simple flood, but with purpose. Dr. Simmons' team quickly realized that the documents spoke of the town's planned disappearance. Cedar Hollow wasn't just a casualty of nature. It had been buried on purpose, its residents relocated, and its history erased. But who had made the decision? And why? Chef Grant's first instinct was to think back to the dam project from 1929. The government had chosen Cedar Hollow to be submerged in the process of creating a reservoir. But no one had ever mentioned anything about hiding an entire town. The town's population was relocated, their homes destroyed, and the land transformed into Cedar Lake. But the strange documents hinted that there was more to the story. It wasn't simply about water and construction. There had been something else, something hidden. As the investigation continued, more peculiarities emerged. No one had any memory of the people who had once lived in Cedar Hollow. The census records showed names, but none of the descendants of the original residents could recall their relatives. It was as if the town had been forgotten, not just by time, but by history itself. This led to even more speculation. Had the town been erased on purpose to hide something? Was there a secret buried beneath the lake? Something that the people of Cedar Hollow had known about? Something that was considered too dangerous to remain above water? One of the most disturbing elements of the investigation was the discovery of old photographs from the town's final days. The images found in the town hall's hidden archives showed the residents of Cedar Hollow going about their daily lives just days before the flood. But in the background of several of these photographs, strange shadows seemed to loom. Some of the faces in the photos were blurry, almost as if they had been altered or intentionally erased. The more the researchers looked, the more unsettling the photographs became. Were the residents hiding something from the camera, or was the camera hiding something from them? The final and most chilling part of the investigation came when a local diver hired to explore the deeper parts of Cedar Lake reported finding something even more mysterious beneath the water. Near the center of the lake, where the town's main square once stood, the diver came across what appeared to be an underground structure. It was not part of the original town, nor could it be explained by natural geological formations. It was man-made, and it was unlike anything the authorities had ever seen. This thing, it wasn't supposed to be there, the diver said, his voice shaking. It was massive, something like a vault or a chamber. I couldn't go deeper because the air supply was running low. But what I saw, it looked like it had been built to hide something important. Theories about what lay hidden beneath the lake began to run wild. Had Cedar Hollow been part of a secret government project? Had the town's disappearance been orchestrated to cover up something so dangerous that it couldn't be allowed to remain above water? Or was there a darker, more ancient mystery at play, one that went back far beyond the town's founding? The questions grew, but the answers remained just out of reach. As the investigation into Cedar Hollow's disappearance deepened, it became clear that this was no ordinary case. What had started as a local curiosity had turned into a full-scale mystery that captured the attention of historians, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists alike. Each new discovery seemed to add another layer of complexity. But the most chilling thing was that no one seemed able to provide a concrete explanation for what had happened or why the town had been hidden away beneath the waters of Cedar Lake. Sheriff Grant, still at the forefront of the investigation, found himself dealing with not just local authorities, but federal agents who had quietly begun showing up. They claimed to be conducting routine environmental studies, but their presence only added fuel to the growing suspicion that something more was at play. The involvement of government agencies raised more questions than answers. Why were they so interested in a town that had disappeared decades ago? Dr. Clara Simmons, the lead archaeologist, had become obsessed with the town's sudden reappearance. She and her team spent hours combing through the remaining remnants of the town, searching for any clue that could explain its deliberate submergence. But the more they uncovered, the more they realized that Cedar Hollow's history had been intentionally erased. The documents they had discovered in the town hall, with their cryptic messages and unsettling references to something being forgotten, only deepened the mystery. Clara began to wonder if Cedar Hollow had been part of a much larger and far more secretive operation. One theory that began to gain traction was that the town had been intentionally submerged to conceal something. Perhaps a hidden resource, a dangerous experiment, or a military project that needed to remain undisturbed. But there was no record of such a project, at least not in the official government files. I keep coming back to the same idea, Dr. Simmons said one evening as she reviewed the documents. This was more than just a town that needed to be flooded. It was a place where something important was hidden, something that couldn't be allowed to surface. To understand the mystery, Clara and Sheriff Grant dug deeper into the history of the area, searching for clues that might have been overlooked. What they found only intensified their suspicions. Cedar Hollow had been founded in the late 1800s by a group of settlers who had purchased the land from a local Native American tribe. The tribe, known as the Red Feather People, had left the area long before the town was established. But rumors persisted of a sacred site hidden somewhere in the mountains, an area that had been off limits to settlers. The settlers who founded Cedar Hollow were well known for their wealth and influence, and records indicated they had connections to some of the wealthiest families in the country. There were whispers, too, of secretive meetings held at the town's old church, where high-ranking officials and prominent citizens would gather. Could these meetings have been part of something more sinister? And if so, what did it have to do with the lake, and why was it necessary to bury the town? As they delved deeper into the town's history, Clara and Sheriff Grant discovered that the original plans for the lake were more complex than anyone had known. The construction of the reservoir had been approved by local authorities, but there were hints that it had been more than just a water project. Some documents suggested that the land around Cedar Hollow had been earmarked for something far more secretive. It wasn't long before theories about the true purpose of the lake began to surface. Some people speculated that the lake had been created to cover up an experimental military project, perhaps a government test site for new technologies hidden away from the public eye. Others believed that it was linked to something more occult, a place where the secrets of the land had been buried in an attempt to keep them from ever being uncovered. One evening, while reviewing old maps of the area, Clara discovered a disturbing pattern. Hidden beneath layers of topographical lines and watermarks, there was a set of coordinates marked in red ink, coordinates that seemed to match up with the location of the town hall in Cedar Hollow. These coordinates pointed to a specific spot beneath the lake, near the church where the settlers had once gathered. And when Clara cross-referenced these coordinates with local legends, a chilling connection was made. The town of Cedar Hollow had been built on top of an ancient burial ground. "This could be it," Clara whispered as she pieced together the information. "The settlers may have disturbed something sacred, and now they've buried it under the water, hoping it would never be found." Sheriff Grant listened carefully, but his thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. The call came from a local fisherman. Bob Miller, the same man who had discovered the first remnants of the town. He'd seen something new. "There's something out there, Sheriff," Bob said, his voice urgent. "It's moving. It's not the train tracks or the buildings. I saw something glowing under the water. I don't know what it is, but it's big. Too big for anything we've seen before." The mention of the glowing object beneath the water sparked something in Sheriff Grant's mind. Could it be connected to the strange symbols they had found? Or was it a completely new phenomenon, something tied to the lake and the town that was buried there? With the mystery now reaching a new level of urgency, the investigation was taken to a new, more intense phase. Theories continued to pour in, but no one could agree on the truth. Was it a government cover-up? Was it an ancient curse? Or was there something far more inexplicable happening in the depths of Cedar Lake? One thing was certain. The more they uncovered, the more it seemed that the mystery of Cedar Hollow was far from over. The answers lay beneath the water, just waiting to be revealed. The whispers of the lake's secrets grew louder with each passing day. As more of the submerged town began to emerge, the sense of something unnatural, even sinister, took hold of the community. The eerie glow beneath the waters, the strange electrical disturbances, and the unsettling stories from those who dared to get too close all pointed to something far beyond the realm of natural explanation. For weeks, the investigation had been a series of dead ends. No one could fully explain the strange symbols found on the old town hall records, the cryptic note that had been written on the margin of the documents, or the glowing object beneath the lake. And yet, each discovery only deepened the mystery. It wasn't until late summer of 1982 that the first true breakthrough occurred. A team of divers had been hired to explore the depths of Cedar Lake, equipped with specialized sonar and cameras to document the submerged town. The lake, fed by a network of underground springs, had always been murky, its waters deep and unpredictable. But the divers were determined to go further, to see if they could uncover more of what had been hidden beneath the surface for so long. As they descended deeper into the lake, one of the divers, John Cole, noticed something unusual. A large, rectangular structure lay deeper than any of the town's known remains, its edges sharp and its features clearly man-made. At first, John thought it was simply another part of the town's infrastructure, a foundation or an old cellar. But as he approached it, his flashlight flickered across a series of strange symbols carved into the surface, symbols that matched the ones they had found on the old town records. "What is this?" John whispered to himself, his voice carried by the underwater communication system. The other divers gathered around him, their curiosity piqued as they floated in the darkened waters. The structure was massive, too large to be a simple building foundation. As they continued to explore, they uncovered a set of doors, made from a material unlike anything they had ever seen. It was almost metallic, smooth and shimmering in the dim light of their torches. The divers attempted to open the doors, but they were locked, sealed shut by years of water pressure and time. Just as they were about to give up, a strange noise echoed through their earpieces, like a low hum vibrating through the water. It was almost imperceptible, but it felt like the lake itself was alive. For a moment, they all paused, exchanging uncertain glances. And then, without warning, the doors opened. It wasn't the sound of rusted metal creaking under the strain of the ocean's pressure. It was as if the structure had sensed their presence, responding to an unseen force. The doors slowly parted, revealing an impossibly dark chamber. The divers peered inside, their lights flickering across strange mechanical devices that seemed to hum with energy. The room was massive, filled with equipment that looked decades, if not centuries, ahead of its time. There were walls lined with panels, each covered in symbols that no one recognized. "It's like a room from another world," one of the divers said, his voice trembling with awe. But what struck them the most wasn't the strange equipment or the unearthly design. It was the feeling that something was watching them. As they ventured deeper into the chamber, the hum grew louder, vibrating in their bones. And then, to their horror, they discovered something they hadn't expected. A series of strange, floating orbs, suspended in mid-air, glowing faintly. The orbs seemed to pulse with a kind of life, glowing brighter as the divers approached. They felt a strange, almost magnetic pull towards them, as though the orbs were calling to them. The divers attempted to reach out to touch one, but before they could, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the room into complete darkness. A cold chill filled the waters around them. The divers, disoriented and panicked, scrambled to find their way back to the surface. But when they surfaced, they had no idea what they had just witnessed. The orbs, the humming, these strange equipment, it all seemed too unreal. And yet, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something far more than just a forgotten town. Sheriff Grant, who had been kept in the loop throughout the investigation, was called to the scene. He listened to the divers' reports with growing unease. Everything they described seemed impossible, and yet the evidence was right there in front of him. The chamber beneath the lake wasn't just a relic. It was active, alive, in a way that couldn't be explained. Dr. Clara Simmons, who had spent weeks poring over the town's history, was now convinced that Cedar Hollow's disappearance was no accident. She theorized that the town had been submerged deliberately, not just for the creation of a reservoir, but to keep whatever was hidden beneath the lake away from the world. This was never just about the town, Clara said, her voice shaking with realization. This is something far older, something that the settlers and even the government were trying to keep hidden. The lake wasn't just built to hide the town, it was built to hide whatever is still down there. But what was it? And why was it still alive? The days following the discovery of the hidden chamber beneath Cedar Lake were filled with uncertainty. The divers, the scientists, and even the government agents who had been involved in the investigation began to realize that they were no longer dealing with a simple historical anomaly. They had stumbled upon something much bigger, much older, and much more dangerous than they had anticipated. Sheriff Mark Grant, who had watched his town shift from a quiet community into the epicenter of an unsolvable mystery, felt the weight of the town's legacy settle heavily on his shoulders. What had once been a town with simple, everyday problems, missing cats, broken fences, and the occasional lost wallet, had now become a riddle that no one could crack. Cedar Hollow was more than just an abandoned town. It was the key to something much deeper, something that was never meant to see the light of day. Clara Simmons, standing on the banks of Cedar Lake in the final moments of the investigation, felt the cold chill of realization sink in. She had spent so much of her life chasing answers and ancient artifacts and forgotten places, but nothing had prepared her for this. The train tracks, the glowing orbs, the strange mechanical room. It was all part of a bigger puzzle, one that was still unsolved, one that seemed to lead to something buried deeper beneath the lake. "We've only uncovered a fraction of what's hidden here," Clara said, her voice laced with awe and fear. "Whatever it is, it's bigger than anything we can comprehend. But whatever it is, it's not finished. It's still waiting." The lake, for all its beauty and tranquility, had become a symbol of the unknowable, a place where answers remained submerged, hidden beneath layers of time and water. The town had been sacrificed to keep the secret buried, and now The town's legacy had become intertwined with the mysteries beneath the surface. Cedar Hollow had been swallowed by the lake, and with it, the truth had vanished, only to resurface once again. The people of Dunmore County, along with the world, had learned something extraordinary, something that no one could have predicted. The lake had hidden an entire town, but it had also protected something far more significant. Whatever lay beneath the surface, whatever had been guarded by the lake for 50 years, would remain a mystery. For some, that was enough. A story never fully told, a question never fully answered. But for others, the legacy of Cedar Hollow would continue to haunt them, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to stay hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to resurface once again. And as the years went by, as the lake returned to its peaceful state and the town was buried in the whispers of forgotten history, the question remained: what was hidden beneath the waters of Cedar Lake? And why had it been kept there, waiting? Perhaps one day the truth would emerge. But for now, Cedar Hollow's legacy lived on, waiting, like the town itself, to be discovered again.